My sister Rebecca was rushed to the emergency room with pregnancy complications, her husband demanding the best surgeon you have, while I stood quietly in the corner. The hospital administrator glanced at me, then back at Rebecca's frantic husband. "Sir, you want our best surgeon?" He looked directly at me. "Dr. Johnson, your family needs you." That was the moment my sister discovered that the family failure she'd banned from her baby shower 3 weeks earlier was the chief of surgery at the city's most prestigious hospital. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. When I graduated from Johns Hopkins Medical School 12 years ago, my family sat through the ceremony like they were attending a funeral. My mother, Judge Patricia Wells, spent most of the time checking her phone and sighing audibly whenever the speakers mentioned years of dedication and sacrifice. My father, Thomas Wells, kept looking at his watch like he had somewhere more important to be. And Rebecca, fresh out of law school and already working at our father's firm, leaned over to our cousin and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, 8 years of school so she can cut people open. What a waste of a perfectly good brain. They saw my medical degree as an expensive detour, my residency in trauma surgery as playing doctor, my deployment to Afghanistan as an extended vacation from real responsibility. For 10 years, they never asked about my work. Not when I performed emergency surgeries in combat zones. Not when I saved lives under artillery fire. Not when I came home with commendations and the quiet nightmares that followed me into civilian hospitals. To them, I was just Emma, the daughter who chose blood and gore over boardrooms and courtrooms, service over success, healing over wealth. The text message came while I was reviewing surgical schedules in my office at Metropolitan General. Rebecca's husband, Michael, had never contacted me directly before, which made his message even more jarring. "Emma, I know we haven't talked, but Rebecca specifically said not to invite you to the baby shower. Mom thinks it would be awkward given your situation, hope you understand." My situation, as if being chief of surgery at the city's premier trauma center was some kind of embarrassing condition that needed to be managed around polite company. I stared at the message for a long moment, remembering the last family gathering where Rebecca had introduced me to her friends as my sister who's still figuring out her career path. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been running the surgical department that handled the most complex cases in the state for 2 years. The baby shower was this weekend. Rebecca's first child. The family's first grandchild. And apparently, I wasn't worthy of celebrating this milestone with them. Not because of any argument or conflict, but simply because my career choice didn't fit their image of success. And sighing sure. I'd learned not to expect invitations to family events years ago. They'd stopped including me when it became clear that I wasn't going to abandon medicine for law, wasn't going to join the family firm, wasn't going to marry someone with the right connections, and settle into the life they'd planned for me. 3 hours later, my pager went off with a trauma alert. A multi-car accident on the interstate, multiple casualties incoming. I was scrubbing in when one of the paramedics mentioned that one victim was pregnant, late 3rd trimester, in critical condition. "What's the patient's name?" I asked, pulling on my surgical gloves. "Rebecca Morrison. Husband said to tell the doctors she's Judge Wells's daughter and they need to get the best surgeon available." Morrison was Rebecca's married name. My sister was being rushed to my hospital, to my emergency room, critically injured and demanding the best medical care available. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. I walked into Trauma Bay 3, where Rebecca lay unconscious, her husband Michael pacing frantically while the attending physician worked to stabilize her condition. Michael was shouting at the medical staff, demanding they call in specialists, insisting they didn't understand who they were dealing with. "This is Judge Wells's daughter. She needs the best surgeon in the city. Get someone who knows what they're doing." The attending physician looked overwhelmed, clearly struggling with both the medical complexity and the family's demands. Michael continued his tirade, threatening lawsuits and promising consequences if Rebecca didn't receive immediate attention from the hospital's top surgeon. That's when the hospital administrator appeared in the doorway. "Trauma surgeon." For the first time in years, my family was about to discover exactly who I'd become. The emergency family meeting happened in the hospital waiting room while Rebecca was being prepped for surgery. My parents arrived within 30 minutes, my mother still wearing her judicial robes from court, my father having abandoned some important business meeting. They gathered around Michael like generals planning a war strategy, their voices carrying the same authoritative tone they used in courtrooms and boardrooms. "This is completely unacceptable," my mother declared, pacing between the uncomfortable plastic chairs. "We specifically told them this is Judge Wells's daughter. They should have had their best surgeon ready the moment she arrived." My father was already on his phone with someone, his voice sharp with authority. "I don't care what their protocol is. My daughter needs immediate attention from your most experienced surgeon." "Yes, I said Judge Wells's daughter. Look it up." Michael stood near the nurse's station, still agitated and demanding updates every few minutes. "The resident they assigned looks like he's barely out of medical school. Rebecca needs someone who actually knows what they're doing." I remained seated in the corner, still wearing my scrubs from the trauma bay, having quickly changed out of my surgical gown after stabilizing Rebecca's condition. None of them had bothered to ask why I was already at the hospital, or how I'd arrived so quickly after Michael's frantic phone call. "Emma," my mother said, finally acknowledging my presence, "what are you doing here? I thought you were working at some clinic downtown." "I work here, Mom. At Metropolitan General." "Oh." She waved her hand dismissively. "Well, maybe you can talk to someone in administration. Explain who Rebecca is. Make sure they understand this family's expectations." My father ended his phone call and turned to me with the same expression he'd worn throughout my childhood, mild irritation mixed with disappointment. "Emma, your mother's right. Use whatever connections you have here to make sure Rebecca gets proper care. This is your sister we're talking about." "I understand that, Dad. Do you?" His voice carried the same tone he'd used when lecturing me about throwing away my potential by choosing medicine over law. "Because right now it seems like you're just sitting here while your sister needs help." Michael rejoined our group, his face red with frustration. "They keep saying the surgeon will be down soon, but nobody can tell me who it is or what their qualifications are. For all we know, they're assigning some general practitioner who's never handled a complex pregnancy case." My mother's lips pursed in that familiar expression of barely contained rage. "This is exactly why we need private health care. These public hospitals treat everyone the same, regardless of who they are or what they contribute to the community." "Rebecca isn't at a public hospital, Patricia," my father corrected. "Metropolitan General is private, one of the most expensive in the city." "Then why are we getting this level of service?" she snapped. The irony of their conversation wasn't lost on me. They were sitting in the hospital where I'd built my reputation, demanding the expertise I'd spent years developing, while treating me like an inconvenient bystander whose only value was potential administrative connections. "Emma," Michael said, his voice taking on a pleading tone, "you've been here longer than us. Have you seen the surgeon they're planning to assign? Do they look competent?" I thought about the 8-hour surgery I'd performed last week to save a construction worker's life after a crane accident. The emergency craniotomy I'd completed just yesterday on a teenager who'd been in a motorcycle crash. The countless trauma cases I'd handled that had built Metropolitan General's reputation as the premier emergency surgical facility in the region. "The surgeon they're assigning is very competent," I said quietly. "But how can you be sure?" my mother demanded. "Because I know their work intimately." None of them understood what I meant. They were about to. Lina Skora. 2 hours into our waiting room vigil, Dr. Martinez from the obstetrics department approached our family with an expression that immediately set everyone on edge. She was young, competent, and clearly uncomfortable with the high-pressure situation my family had created around Rebecca's case. "Mr. Morrison, I need to update you on your wife's condition. The placental abruption is more severe than we initially assessed. We're going to need surgical intervention to save both mother and baby." Michael stood up abruptly, his face pale. "What kind of surgery? Who's performing it? We specifically requested your best surgeon. The surgery will be performed by our chief of surgery. I can assure you, your wife will receive the highest level of care possible." My mother stepped forward, her judicial authority on full display. "Dr. Martinez, I'm Judge Patricia Wells, Rebecca's mother. We need more information than that. What are this surgeon's qualifications? How many similar cases have they handled? What's their success rate? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Martinez glanced nervously toward me, then back at my mother. Ma'am, our chief of surgery has extensive experience in high-risk obstetric cases. She's board-certified in trauma surgery, with additional certification in emergency obstetrics. She's performed over 200 similar procedures. She? My father's voice carried a note of concern. How old is this female surgeon? We're talking about my daughter's life here. I watched Dr. Martinez struggle with how to respond to my father's barely concealed sexism. Sir, gender and age aren't indicators of surgical competence. Our chief of surgery has an exceptional track record and— That's not what I asked, my father interrupted. I want to know her age, her experience level, where she trained, and whether she's the absolute best option available. Dr. Martinez took a deep breath. She trained at Johns Hopkins Medical School, completed her residency at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, served multiple deployments as a trauma surgeon in Afghanistan, and has been chief of surgery here for 2 years. Her success rate in emergency obstetric procedures is 97.3%. The waiting room fell silent. Those credentials were impressive by any standard, and even my family couldn't find immediate fault with them. Walter Reed? Michael asked. So she's military? Former military? Yes. She specialized in combat trauma surgery before transitioning to civilian practice. My mother's expression shifted slightly. Military service was something she could respect, even if she didn't fully understand it. Well, that's better than I expected, but I still want to speak with her before the surgery begins. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Dr. Martinez explained. She's currently scrubbing in, and the surgery needs to begin immediately. Every minute we delay increases the risk to both patients. Then we'll speak with the hospital administrator, my father demanded. Someone needs to confirm that Rebecca is receiving priority treatment. Dr. Martinez nodded. I'll have him come down right away. After she left, my family resumed their anxious pacing and demanding phone calls. Michael was on the phone with his law firm's partners, apparently arranging for legal representation, quote, just in case. My mother was calling other judges to get recommendations for medical malpractice attorneys. My father was researching the hospital's ownership structure and board of directors. None of them noticed when I quietly excused myself to review Rebecca's charts and confirm the surgical plan. None of them questioned why the medical staff kept nodding respectfully when they saw me in the hallway. None of them wondered why I seemed to know the layout of the hospital so well or why nurses kept asking if I needed anything. They were so focused on demanding the best surgeon available that they never considered that she might already be standing right next to them. The hospital administrator was on his way down, and my family was about to discover that their biggest advocate had been in the room the entire time. 20 minutes later, I found myself in the most surreal situation of my career, reviewing my own sister's medical records, while my family demanded to speak with someone in authority about the surgeon who would be operating on her. The irony was so thick I could barely concentrate on the clinical details of Rebecca's condition. Her placental abruption was severe but manageable. The baby was at 34 weeks, viable but requiring immediate delivery. Rebecca had lost significant blood, but her vitals were stable. It was exactly the kind of emergency I'd handled dozens of times during my deployments and civilian practice. I was studying her latest lab results when I overheard Michael on the phone with someone from his law firm. Yes, I understand medical malpractice law, but this is different. This is Judge Wells's daughter. If anything goes wrong, we need to be prepared to hold someone accountable. My mother was having a similar conversation with her judicial colleagues. I don't care what their protocols are, Margaret. Rebecca deserves the best surgeon available, not whoever happens to be on call tonight. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Rebecca's emergency contact information listed only Michael and my parents. My name wasn't anywhere on her forms. According to her official medical records, Dr. Emma Johnson didn't exist as far as Rebecca Morrison was concerned. I walked to the nurse's station to verify what I'd seen. Excuse me, can you pull up Rebecca Morrison's emergency contacts? The nurse, who'd been working with me for 2 years, looked confused. Dr. Johnson, you want me to check your sister's emergency contacts? Just humor me, please." She pulled up the records on her screen. She's listed her husband, Michael Morrison, and her parents, Thomas and Patricia Wells. No siblings listed. So Rebecca had deliberately excluded me from her emergency contacts. Even in a life-threatening situation, she'd chosen to pretend I didn't exist, rather than acknowledge that her sister was a doctor who might be able to help. I was processing this discovery when the hospital administrator, David Chen, appeared at the nurse's station. He'd been the one who hired me 2 years ago, and we'd worked together on numerous high-profile cases. "Dr. Johnson, I heard your sister was brought in tonight. How is she doing?" "She's stable, but she needs immediate surgery. The family is demanding to speak with someone in authority about the surgeon." Chen raised an eyebrow. "They don't know?" "They have no idea. Should I tell them?" I looked toward the waiting room where my family was still making phone calls and demanding updates. They'd spent years dismissing my career, excluding me from family events, treating my medical degree like an embarrassing hobby. Now they were desperate for exactly the expertise they'd never bothered to acknowledge. "Let me handle it," I said, "but I want you there when I tell them." "Of course. This should be interesting." As we walked toward the waiting room, I thought about all the family gatherings I'd missed, all the achievements they'd ignored, all the times they'd introduced me as their daughter, who still hadn't figured out what to do with her life. Tonight, they were going to discover that their family failure was the only person who could save Rebecca's life. The waiting room fell silent when Chen and I approached. My parents stood up, their expressions expectant and demanding. "Mr. and Mrs. Wells," Chen began formally, "I understand you have concerns about your daughter's surgical care." "We want to speak with the surgeon," my mother said firmly. "We want confirmation that Rebecca is receiving the highest level of medical attention possible." "I can absolutely confirm that," Chen replied. "Your daughter is being treated by our chief of surgery, the most qualified emergency obstetric surgeon in the region." "Good," my father said. "When can we meet with this surgeon?" Chen looked at me, then back at my family. "You've actually been sitting with her for the past 3 hours." The silence that followed was deafening. My father was the first to break the stunned silence. "What do you mean we've been sitting with her? Emma works at some clinic downtown." "Sir," Chen said carefully, "Dr. Emma Johnson is our chief of surgery. She's been the head of our surgical department for 2 years. Michael stared at me like I'd just materialized out of thin air. "That's impossible. Emma's not a surgeon. She's just what?" I asked quietly. My mother found her voice first, her judicial training helping her process shocking information quickly. "Emma, is this true? Are you really the chief of surgery here?" "Yes, Mom. I have been for 2 years." "But you never told us," she said, her voice carrying a note of accusation. "We thought you were working at some small clinic, maybe doing family medicine or something minor. You never asked what I did for work, any of you." My father's face was cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and something that might have been pride. "Emma, if this is true, why didn't you say something when Rebecca was brought in?" "I did say something. I told you the surgeon was very competent. I told you I knew their work intimately." Chen stepped forward, clearly enjoying the family drama unfolding before him. "Perhaps I should clarify Dr. Johnson's qualifications. She graduated top of her class from Johns Hopkins, completed her residency at Walter Reed, served 3 deployments in Afghanistan as a trauma surgeon, and joined our staff as chief of surgery after finishing her fellowship in emergency obstetrics at Mass General." The waiting room fell silent again. These weren't the credentials of someone playing doctor or figuring out their career path. These were the qualifications of someone who dedicated their life to becoming the best surgeon possible. 3 deployments? My mother whispered. "Afghanistan," I confirmed. "Field hospitals, combat zones, mass casualty events. I spent 4 years performing surgery under conditions that would terrify most civilian doctors." Michael was shaking his head slowly. "But Rebecca said you were..." "She told everyone you were just..." "Just what, Michael?" "She said you were wasting your education on some dead-end medical job." She said you couldn't handle the pressure of real professional responsibility. I thought about the 16-hour surgery I'd performed last month to separate conjoined twins. The emergency craniotomy I'd completed on New Year's Eve while my family was celebrating at their country club. The dozens of trauma cases I'd handled that had built my reputation as one of the region's most skilled surgeons. Michael, I perform emergency surgeries that determine whether people live or die. I make decisions in minutes that affect families for generations. I've saved lives under artillery fire and in conditions that would break most people. If that's not real professional responsibility, I'm not sure what is. My father was studying me with an expression I'd never seen before. Emma, why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were unsuccessful? Because you never gave me the chance. Every time I tried to explain my work, you changed the subject. Every family gathering, you introduced me as your daughter, who still hadn't found her direction. You were so convinced that success only looked like law or business that you couldn't see what was right in front of you. Chen cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps this conversation should continue after the surgery. Dr. Johnson, your sister's condition requires immediate attention. I looked at my family. Really looked at them. For the first time in years. They were staring at me like they were seeing me for the first time, which in many ways, they were. You're right, I said, standing up. Rebecca needs surgery now. We can discuss family dynamics later. As I headed toward the surgical suite, my mother called after me. Emma, wait. Are you really going to be the one operating on Rebecca? I turned back to face them. Mom, I'm the only surgeon in this hospital qualified to handle her case. Whether you trust me or not, I'm her best chance. The weight of that truth settled over the waiting room as I walked away to save my sister's life. The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours during which I worked to save both Rebecca and her baby while knowing that my family sat in the waiting room grappling with the reality of who I actually was. The placental abruption was more complex than expected, requiring delicate work to control bleeding while ensuring the baby's safety during the emergency C-section. When I finally emerged from the operating room, exhausted but successful, I found my family exactly where I'd left them. They looked up at me with expressions I'd never seen before, respect mixed with something that might have been awe. Emma? My mother asked quietly. Rebecca is stable. The baby is healthy. A little girl, 5 pounds, 3 ounces. Both are going to be fine. Michael broke down in tears, grabbing my hands. Thank you. God, Emma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I mean, we never knew. Knew what, Michael? That you could. You saved them both. I sat down heavily in one of the plastic chairs, still wearing my surgical scrubs. This is what I do, Michael. This is what I've been doing for 10 years. Emergency surgery, trauma cases, life or death situations. It's not a hobby or a phase, it's my career. My father was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Okay. When Rebecca was planning her baby shower, when she decided not to invite you, did you know she was excluding you because she thought you were unsuccessful? The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I thought about the text message Michael had sent, about Rebecca's dismissive comments at family gatherings, about being introduced as the daughter who couldn't figure out her life. Yes, Dad, I knew. And you never corrected her? How could I? Every time I tried to explain my work, you all changed the subject. When I mentioned my surgeries, you acted like I was talking about some minor medical procedures. When I told you about my promotion to chief of surgery, Mom said it was nice that I was moving up in the hospital hierarchy. My mother winced. I remember that conversation. I thought you were talking about some administrative position. You thought I was filing paperwork. I thought you were maybe coordinating schedules or managing supplies. I didn't understand that chief of surgery meant you were actually in charge of everything. I looked around at my family, seeing clearly for the first time how completely they'd misunderstood my life. Mom, I oversee a department of 47 surgeons. I manage a budget of $12 million. I perform the most complex emergency surgeries in the region. I'm published in medical journals and teach at the University Medical School." The silence that followed was deafening. "Why didn't you tell us?" my father asked quietly. "I tried. But you were so convinced that success only looked like your kind of success that you couldn't see anything else. You measured worth by courtroom victories and business deals, not by lives saved or medical innovations." Michael was shaking his head slowly. "Rebecca used to say you were wasting your intelligence on medicine. She said you could have been a successful lawyer like your parents, but you chose to play doctor instead." "Play doctor," I repeated the words, tasting their bitterness. "I've performed over 800 surgeries, Michael. I've saved hundreds of lives. I've worked in combat zones and handled mass casualty events. But to Rebecca, to all of you, I was just playing." My mother was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Emma, we're so sorry, we just didn't understand." "You didn't want to understand, there's a difference." For the first time in my adult life, my family was seeing me clearly. And they were discovering that the daughter they'd dismissed as a failure was the only reason their newest family member was alive. 3 days later, when Rebecca was stable enough for visitors, my family gathered in her hospital room like they were conducting a summit meeting. I'd been checking on her recovery when they arrived, and the tension in the room was immediately palpable. Rebecca looked pale but alert, her newborn daughter sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside her bed. When she saw me, her expression was a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment that I'd never seen before. "Emma," she said quietly, "Michael told me what happened, that you were the one who saved us." "I was doing my job, Rebecca. Your job." She repeated the words like she was tasting them for the first time. "Emma, I need to apologize. I need to explain why I didn't invite you to the baby shower." I sat down in the chair beside her bed, aware that my parents and Michael were watching this conversation with intense interest. "You don't need to explain anything." "Yes, I do." Rebecca's voice was stronger now, more determined. "I told everyone you weren't invited because I thought your career was going nowhere. I was embarrassed by what I thought you were doing with your life. The honesty was brutal, but necessary. I told my friends that my sister was wasting her education on some dead-end medical job. I said you couldn't handle real professional pressure, that you'd chosen medicine because you couldn't succeed in law or business." My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Rebecca, you don't need to." "Yes, I do, Mom. Emma deserves to know the truth." Rebecca looked directly at me. "I was ashamed of you. I thought you were the family failure, and I didn't want my successful friends to meet my unsuccessful sister." The words hung in the air like a confession at trial. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "But Emma," Rebecca continued, "I was wrong about everything. You're not the failure. You're the most successful person in our family, and I was too stupid and shallow to see it. I thought about all the family gatherings where I'd been introduced as the daughter who couldn't figure out her life. All the conversations where my achievements had been dismissed or ignored. All the times I'd tried to explain my work only to be met with polite disinterest. Rebecca, why are you telling me this now? Because you saved my life, you saved my daughter's life. And you did it even after I excluded you, even after I treated you like you didn't matter, even after I spent years telling people you were unsuccessful." My mother was crying again, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Emma, we all owe you an apology. We misjudged everything about your career, your achievements, your worth. And more than that," my father added, "we failed to support you when you needed family behind you. We were so focused on our definition of success that we couldn't see yours." Michael nodded agreement. "Emma, Rebecca and I want to make this right. We want to have a proper celebration for the baby, and we want you to be the guest of honor. We want everyone to know that the chief of surgery at Metropolitan General is our sister, our family." I looked around the room at faces filled with remorse and newfound respect. They wanted to celebrate me now that they understood who I was, but I couldn't forget that they'd spent years dismissing who I'd always been. "I appreciate the gesture," I said carefully, "but you can't just erase 10 years of dismissal with one celebration." "Then what can we do?" Rebecca asked. "How do we fix this?" I stood up, checking the monitors beside her bed out of professional habit. You start by understanding that my worth as a person was never dependent on your approval, and you continue by never again assuming that success only looks one way. Some relationships could be repaired. Others needed to be rebuilt from scratch. Over the following weeks, my family embarked on what could only be described as a research mission to understand my actual career. They approached it with the same methodical intensity they brought to legal cases and business deals, determined to comprehend what they'd missed for 10 years. My mother started by calling Johns Hopkins Medical School to verify my academic record. She spent an hour on the phone with the registrar's office, learning that I'd graduated summa cum laude, been elected to Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Society, and received the Dean's Award for Clinical Excellence. "Emma," she said when she called me that evening, "why didn't you tell us about these honors? The registrar said you were in the top 2% of your class." "I did tell you, Mom. At graduation, I mentioned the honors. You said that's nice, dear, and changed the subject to Rebecca's law school plans." My father took a different approach. He contacted the American College of Surgeons to understand what board certification actually meant, what a surgical residency involved, and what qualifications were required to become chief of surgery at a major hospital. "Emma, I had no idea that your residency at Walter Reed involved trauma surgery training. I thought residency was like an internship, just shadowing other doctors and learning procedures." "Dad, I was performing emergency surgeries on wounded soldiers. I was making life-or-death decisions daily. That's not shadowing. That's being responsible for people's lives." Michael took perhaps the most thorough approach. He researched Metropolitan General Hospital's reputation, my published research papers, and even found video testimonials from patients whose lives I'd saved. He discovered that I'd been featured in medical journals, had spoken at national conferences, and was considered one of the leading trauma surgeons in the region. "Emma, I found a case study you published about separated conjoined twins. The medical journal called your surgical technique innovative and life-saving. Why didn't Rebecca know about this?" "Because she never asked what I was working on. When I mentioned complex surgeries, she assumed I meant routine procedures. When I talked about research, she thought I was filing paperwork. Rebecca herself began the most difficult investigation of all, examining her own assumptions and prejudices. She read everything she could find about my military service, my surgical innovations, and my role at the hospital. Emma, I found an article about your work in Afghanistan. It said you performed surgery under rocket fire and saved 17 soldiers in a single night. How could I not know this about my own sister?" "Because you never wanted to know, Rebecca. Every time I tried to share my experiences, you redirected the conversation to your legal cases or your social plans." The breaking point came when my family attended a hospital fundraising gala where I was being honored for my contributions to emergency medicine. They sat at my table as colleagues praised my work, as the hospital board presented me with an award for surgical excellence, as fellow doctors shared stories about lives I'd saved. "Ladies and gentlemen," the hospital administrator announced, "Dr. Emma Johnson represents the best of what medicine can achieve. Her innovative surgical techniques, her dedication to training the next generation of surgeons, and her unwavering commitment to saving lives make her not just our chief of surgery, but our inspiration." The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. My family sat in stunned silence, watching hundreds of medical professionals honor the daughter they'd written off as unsuccessful. After the ceremony, my mother approached me with tears in her eyes. "Emma, we've been living in a completely different reality. We had no idea who you really were. You had every opportunity to find out, Mom. You just chose not to look." For the first time, my family was seeing the full scope of what they'd dismissed for a decade, and they were beginning to understand that their ignorance had been a choice, not an accident. 2 months after Rebecca's surgery, the most unexpected ally emerged from within my own hospital. Dr. Sarah Kim, the resident who'd been working Rebecca's case the night she was brought in, approached me with information that changed everything I thought I knew about my family's recent transformation. "Dr. Johnson, I need to tell you something about the night your sister was admitted. Something I probably should have mentioned earlier. We were in my office reviewing surgical schedules when Sarah's expression turned serious. Your brother-in-law, Michael, didn't just call you that night asking for help. He called the 3 other hospitals first, demanding to speak with their chief of surgery. When they told him their chiefs weren't available for consultation on emergency cases, he hung up and called the next hospital. My stomach dropped. What are you saying? He only called you because Metropolitan General was the 4th hospital on his list, and by then he was desperate. He didn't call you because you're family, Dr. Johnson. He called you because you were his last option for getting access to a chief surgeon. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I'd assumed that Michael's frantic call meant that, in a crisis, family bonds had overcome their professional dismissal of me. But the truth was much simpler and more painful. I'd been a backup plan, not a beloved sister. There's more, Sarah continued. I overheard him on the phone with someone after your sister's surgery. He was bragging about having, quote, inside connections at the hospital, claiming that his family had special access to the chief of surgery. He was treating your relationship like a networking advantage. I thought about the family meetings, the apologies, the promises to celebrate my achievements. Had any of it been genuine remorse? Or was it all strategic relationship management now that they understood my professional value? Dr. Johnson, I'm telling you this because I've watched what you've been through with your family. You deserve to know their real motivations. That evening, I received a call from my mother that confirmed Sarah's suspicions. Emma, dear, I hope you don't mind, but I mentioned to Judge Harrison that you're the chief of surgery at Metropolitan General. Her grandson is having some minor surgery next month, and she was wondering if you could make sure he receives special attention. Mom, are you asking me to show favoritism to a patient because of your professional connections? Well, not favoritism exactly, just professional courtesy. Judge Harrison has been very helpful with some of my cases, and it would mean a lot if you could ensure her grandson gets the best care possible. The request was followed by similar calls from my father, asking if I could expedite medical care for his business associates, and from Rebecca wondering if I could get Michael's golf partner moved up on a surgical waiting list. They weren't celebrating my achievements. They were trying to monetize my position. The final confirmation came when I discovered that Rebecca had been telling her friends that she'd always known I was successful, and that the family had always been supportive of my medical career. She was rewriting history to make herself look better while positioning me as a family resource for medical connections. Emma, she said when I confronted her about the revised narrative, does it really matter why we're trying to reconnect? The important thing is that we're rebuilding our relationship. It matters because you're not rebuilding anything, Rebecca. You're trying to use me. That's not fair. We genuinely want to be closer to you. You want to be closer to my professional connections. There's a difference. I realized that my family's newfound respect wasn't about recognizing my worth as a person. It was about recognizing my value as a professional asset. They'd moved from dismissing my career to trying to exploit it, but they still weren't seeing me as anything more than what I could do for them. The hardest lesson was accepting that some people only valued relationships for what they could gain from them. The breaking point came at Rebecca's belated baby shower, which my family had insisted on throwing 3 months after her daughter's birth. They'd planned it as what my mother called a celebration of family and new beginnings, but I understood it was really an opportunity to show off their newly discovered connection to a prominent surgeon. The guest list read like a who's who of the city's legal and business elite: judges, prosecutors, corporate executives, and their spouses. People who'd never shown interest in my family before were suddenly eager to attend a party where they might meet the chief of surgery at Metropolitan General. I arrived to find my mother holding court near the gift table, regaling a group of women with stories about Emma's incredible surgical skills and how proud we've always been of her medical career. The revision of history was so complete that I barely recognized the narrative she was telling. "Oh, here she is now," my mother announced as I approached. "Ladies, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Dr. Emma Johnson, Chief of Surgery at Metropolitan General Hospital." The women turned toward me with the kind of predatory interest I'd learned to recognize in people who wanted something. Within minutes, I was fielding requests for medical consultations, surgical referrals, and just quick questions about various health concerns. "Dr. Johnson," said Mrs. Patterson, wife of the city's district attorney, "my husband has been having some concerning symptoms." Could you perhaps take a look at his medical records and give us your professional opinion? Before I could respond, Judge Harrison approached with her grandson in tow. Dr. Johnson, I believe your mother mentioned that you might be able to help ensure Timothy receives excellent care during his upcoming procedure. The requests kept coming. Could I expedite someone's surgical consultation? Could I recommend a specialist for someone's daughter? Could I review test results for someone's husband? It became clear that I wasn't a guest at this party. I was the main attraction, the reason these people had come. Rebecca approached me during a brief lull in the medical networking. Emma, isn't this wonderful? Everyone is so impressed that you're our sister. Mom and Dad are so proud they can barely contain themselves. Rebecca, do you hear what you just said? They're proud that I'm useful to them, not proud of who I am. What's the difference? You're successful, we're celebrating your success, and everyone can see that our family supports each other. The difference is that none of you supported me when I was building this career. You dismissed me, excluded me, and treated me like a failure. Now you want to take credit for my achievements because they benefit you socially. Rebecca's expression hardened. Emma, you're being dramatic. We made mistakes, we apologized, and now we're trying to make things right. You're not making things right. You're exploiting my position for your own gain. That's when my father approached with David Morrison, a prominent corporate attorney who'd been circling our conversation like a shark scenting blood. Emma, I'd like you to meet David Morrison. He's interested in discussing some medical legal consulting opportunities with you. Morrison extended his hand with an oily smile. Dr. Johnson, your father tells me you have extensive experience with trauma cases and medical malpractice prevention. My firm represents several hospitals and we're always looking for expert medical consultants. The picture became crystal clear. This wasn't a baby shower. It was a business networking event designed to monetize my medical expertise and professional connections. My family had transformed their newfound knowledge of my career into a profit opportunity. Mr. Morrison, I said calmly, I'm not interested in consulting work with your firm. Perhaps we could discuss it further. Your father mentioned that you might be open to opportunities that would benefit the whole family. I looked at my father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Dad, did you promise Mr. Morrison that I would work with his firm? I said we might be able to arrange something mutually beneficial. A consulting relationship that would provide you with additional income while helping the family's professional network. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. My family hadn't just invited these people to meet me. They'd been promising my professional services as if I were a commodity they could trade. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, raising my voice loud enough for the entire party to hear. I need to make something clear. I am not available for medical consultations, surgical referrals, or professional favors based on family connections. The room fell silent. My mother's face went pale as she realized I was about to destroy her carefully orchestrated networking event. Furthermore, I continued, I want everyone here to understand that my family's recent interest in my career coincides directly with their discovery that my position might benefit them professionally. For 10 years, they dismissed my work as unimportant. 3 months ago, they discovered I could be useful to them. Judge Harrison set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. Dr. Johnson, I think there may be some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. My family excluded me from important events because they were embarrassed by what they thought was my unsuccessful career. Now they're including me because they've realized my career can serve their interests. Rebecca grabbed my arm. Emma, stop. You're embarrassing everyone. I'm telling the truth, Rebecca, something this family has struggled with for years. I looked around the room at faces filled with disappointment and awkward embarrassment. These people hadn't come to celebrate a new baby or reconnect with family. They'd come to network with a prominent surgeon they thought they could access through family connections. For those of you who came here expecting medical favors or professional consultations, I'm sorry to disappoint you. For those who came to celebrate Rebecca's daughter, the baby is beautiful and healthy. I walked toward the door, then paused. Mom, Dad, Rebecca. When you're ready to have a relationship based on genuine respect rather than professional utility, let me know. Until then, please Please stop using my career as a networking tool. The silence that followed me out of that house was the sound of a family finally understanding that respect couldn't be retrofitted onto a relationship built on dismissal and exploitation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.